Very much, Danita, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for the invitation to be able to join you, and I wish you well for what sounds like it's going to be a pretty long day, so I am glad I'm first up. It will also be a big day here and tomorrow with some very important bills finding its way into the Senate and hopefully through the Senate as well. The Turnbull government's plan for a stronger economy is working. Danita just referred to the utes, but I could equally refer to the skyline of centres like Liverpool in Western Sydney, where there's cranes everywhere. Now, that's not to say that the economy doesn't have distance yet to travel, and that from time to time we still get news that we don't like and that we want to see be better in the future. But the truth is that the plan that we've set out for a stronger economy is working. The economy is strengthening. There are more utes. And that wasn't just some sort of throwaway line. In the national accounts, it's actually borne out. There were more utes in the inventories built up. There were more utes in the capital imports. There were more utes in the non-mining investment figures. So it was backed into the data, and that's where the observation was actually drawn from. Our plan for a stronger economy is working. And it's been working after a prolonged exit from the mining investment boom that stripped some $80 billion out of our economy. And over now some years, we have been working our way back up to the top of a global leaderboard when it comes to growth in our economy. And the national account showed that growth was running through the year at 3.1%, higher than a year ago. A rate that's put us on those figures ahead of every major advanced G7 economy in the world today. Now, figures change from quarter to quarter. We'll see what next quarter says. But certainly in those most recent figures, and the through-the-year figure more specifically, that was a very strong year of growth for the Australian economy. Non-mining business investment at that time also grew by 10% in the last 12 months. That is a rate of growth which is 5 times what the long-run average is for non-mining investment growth in this country. And with 8 consecutive quarters, that's the longest continuous growth since before the start of the mining investment boom. So our economy is strengthening. It's getting stronger. And we have a plan to ensure that continues. It's no accident. The momentum has been building because businesses, like all of those represented in this room today and well beyond, have been liberated to grow, to invest in their future and hire more Australians. And the plan has been working at a time when the global economy indeed has been strengthening. But we're all very mindful of the uncertainties and risks that are out there, whether it's in the trade environment, whether it's in the external environment where it relates to credit issues in China, or indeed domestically where there are risks. But they only highlight the need as to why you need to have a plan for a stronger economy in times like that. And it only underlines and underscores the need why you cannot take the growth in our economy that we've been able to achieve as a nation for granted. It underscores why you need to stick to the plan. The plan has already secured tax cuts for businesses with a turnover up to $50 million a year. And as you know, we're seeking to have that extended across the whole economy. An instant asset write-off, which has been in place for some years now, allowing businesses to purchase many things, including quite a lot of utes. Cutting red tape by streamlining GST reporting for around 2.7 million small businesses, which has reduced that compliance form from 3 pages to 3 questions. 20 questions down to 3. Practical things that help businesses just spend more time on their businesses. Spending less time paying tax to the government and less time complying with things they need to do for governments. Our export trade deals and our capacity to continue to pursue them, no less so than in the steel and aluminium industry, where the Prime Minister has demonstrated a capacity to deal in what is a very uncertain global trade environment, I would argue, better than any leader in the world today. And the results speak for themselves. Imagine if someone else was doing that. A defence industry plan that is supporting the transition of Australian manufacturing all around the country. And a jobs plan that I outline further instalments to in this year's budget, investing in science and technology, a 21st century medical industry, creating jobs of the future. We've had record jobs growth, as you know, opening the door of opportunity to Australian families, older workers seeking to re-gear in the new economy, younger workers beginning their careers. Last year, 1 in 5 of those record jobs numbers went to males aged over 55. And in the most recent figures, more than 80,000 young people got a job over the last 12 months. So right across the economy, we are seeing those benefits. But we want the benefits of our plan for a stronger economy to do more, to go further. We know that the benefits of the stronger economy we've already been able to encourage has not yet been felt by all Australians. We know that. I said that in this year's budget and last year's. And I'm sure you know that too. And so that's why it's important to stick to the plan, so we can continue to ensure that those benefits reach all parts of the country, regional, rural, suburban, in the heart of our cities, to ensure that all Australians share in the benefits. In addition to jobs and growth, which we said we'd deliver and have, a stronger economy also delivers the infrastructure that our country needs and our economy needs, both now and the future, to bust congestion in our cities. As much as I like to see those utes on the road, I like to see them even more on the site and not having to wait around in traffic in congested cities. Much prefer to see them pulling up as a residence where they're doing some work or making their deliveries or wherever they need to be. It delivers the services that Australians rely on. Much is said about how much needs to be invested in health and education, the pharmaceutical benefits scheme, our hospitals. You cannot do any of it unless you have a stronger economy. So the guarantee that we provide as a government through our plan for a stronger economy is a guarantee that people who rely on Medicare can take to the bank, because our plan for Medicare, our guarantee of Medicare, is backed by our plan for a stronger economy. And if you don't have one of those, you don't have a guarantee for Medicare. It supports what is needed for our key national security agencies, our border force, our defence forces, to equip them properly to keep Australians safe, where we have a very strong record. And a stronger economy delivers a budget that is returning to balance 1 year ahead of what we had previously projected, that has enabled us to finally turn the corner on debt. Net debt turns from this year, wrestling that enormous rampaging, not Roy Slaven, but that enormous rampaging gorilla of debt that we inherited when we came to government, which was running at 30% growth, and wrestling that down for it now to be turned around and heading in the other direction has not been an easy task. We had John Key at a dinner the other night, and we all are very aware of the tremendous job that he and Bill English did in New Zealand. It took them just over 6 budgets, 6 years, to get their budget back into balance, into surplus. Under our plan, what I announced in this year's budget, it'll be the same for us. It's no easy task turning that ship around. It's not done overnight, and certainly in a political environment and in a parliament where enabling you to do all the things you want to do as soon as you want to do it can always be challenging. But in our government, we are matching the record of the key English government that was able to achieve that turnaround in their national finances over that period of time. So we are returning to balance in 2019-20. Real growth in spending is at the lowest level of any government in more than 50 years. Net debt will fall by $30 billion over the budget and forward estimates, and by over $230 billion under our plan over the next decade. So we see the economy as something you must grow to guarantee the essentials Australians rely on, to create the jobs that Australians rely on, to support the businesses that Australians have invested in, and the proprietors of those businesses, the owners of those businesses, have put everything on to see them succeed, to keep Australians safe, and to return our budget back into balance. Our opponents see the economy as something just to tax, not something to grow. And today I'm going to spend a bit of time with that. Bill Shorten and Labor will hit the economy with more than $200 billion in more taxes over the next decade, and that does not include what they announced yesterday, which was an additional $70 billion in income tax burden on Australians over the next 10 years. $200 billion in higher taxes, and yesterday they thought for extra measure they'd whack another $70 billion on as well. It includes that $200 billion increasing the top marginal tax rate by 2%. It includes the tax on family businesses through their changes to trusts, which I know will affect many businesses in the construction and building sector. It includes the tax on superannuation contributions that they have announced. Australians saving for their future will be taxed more under what Labor proposes. The tax on retirees and pensioners, they're not fully excluded on what they announced with their changes to imputation credits. That not only did they stuff up when they announced it and had to backtrack on it within a fortnight, but the Treasury costing reveals they're out by some $10 billion. Now, when you're out by $10 billion, that's bad enough. But as we learnt with Labor and the mining tax, they spend money they don't have. So they count the money on the revenue, muck that up, and then they go and spend it on the expenditure side. That's how we got ourselves into debt under Labor. That's how the deficit grew. And that's what we've been seeking to reverse over these last almost 5 years. It also includes their intention to increase taxes on business. Not only do they not support the $35 billion of the measures that are currently before the Senate, which will see business tax cuts making business taxes more competitive, extended to all businesses in the economy, and we have a reminder today with the sad news for some 8,000 people who work for Telstra about what that means for them. It's a chilling reminder of how important it is to ensure that all Australian businesses can be competitive. They all face a tough global environment. Despite the improving global conditions, we cannot be complacent about it. The reason we want to see more competitive business taxes in Australia is to ensure that all businesses, as they go through big changes, like clearly in that sector are occurring. But if you're taxing them more, it makes it even harder. And then people who are going through these changes, and some 8,000 people affected, not all of them onshore, a number of them offshore as well, they will be able, under a Turnbull government, to be going into an economy that's growing and where jobs are being created. Imagine the alternative. But today I want to hone in one. I should stress also that Labor will be putting the tax up on businesses. They have not made any statement at all to dispute this. If they make a change in the future, well, so be it. But their policy today and what their budget is based on is taxes for small businesses and medium-sized businesses above 2 million, up to 50 million, will have the legislated tax cuts that have passed this parliament reversed, and those taxes will be increased. But today I want to focus on another one, and that's Labor's housing taxes and the decision to abolish negative gearing on established dwellings and to increase capital gains tax by 50% on everything. Everything. From shops, warehouses, factories, industrial buildings, to apartments and houses, new and old. Turnbull government, when it comes to the housing sector, has adopted a very targeted and calibrated approach in dealing with the issues in the housing sector, in particular housing affordability. And it has seen the heat come out of our largest, overheated, some would say, property markets in Sydney and Melbourne, while at the same time seeing underperforming or weaker markets improving around the country. Now that is, we believe, a responsible economic approach to the challenges and stresses and risks that were emerging in the housing market. They also had knock-on effects for the overall level of household debt in Australia, which is at a high level, but it does have around a 5 times assets coverage. But 80% of that household debt is in the housing sector. And so it was prudent to be keeping a very watchful eye on what was happening in those housing sectors, in the housing sector. And together with measures that were announced in last year's budget, which provided support to first home buyers, a tax cut for first home buyers means they can save for their first home 30% faster than they could before, with exactly the same amount of savings they were putting in by giving them tax breaks. And encouraging new housing supply, which at the end of the day is the fundamental issue when it comes to addressing housing affordability in this country. We also supported measures through APRA, and as was canvassed broadly within the Council of Financial Regulators, to limit what was happening with investor lending in Australia through macroprudential controls, the condition on interest-only loans and, of course, the growth in investor credit. Now, the thing about macroprudential controls is they're highly flexible and they're very targeted, and they can be altered at a moment's notice. They're not legislated. You are able to watch how they are impacting on a market, and you can adjust them carefully and credibly, signalling very clearly to the market. That is the careful and responsible and moderate approach, and what has enabled us to do to date is to avoid a hard landing in the housing sector. In Sydney, prices have declined in more recent times. They moderated down from double-digit growth approaching almost 20%, 17% to May 2017. And in Melbourne, they are growing at just around 2.2% at the moment, and that's down from a peak of over 13%. Things were getting hot. They were getting hot, and that was elevating risk in the sector. So this has been a necessary cooling and a welcome pause in what we were seeing happening in those particular markets. And the Reserve Bank Governor, Dr. Lowe, noted just last week that despite that cooling and that pause, we should remember that house prices in Sydney and Melbourne are still up 40% on what they were at the start of 2014. I mean, houses and apartments are not traded like shares. They don't change hands every afternoon, several times a day. Largely they're owned by owner-occupiers who hold on to them for a long period of time. So it has been a welcome pause, and Tim Lawless from CoreLogic has noted that the Australian housing market is showing every sign of recording a soft landing, and that is very welcome. Through the year, growth in investor credit to April was just 2.3%, well below that 10% speed limit, and as we know, that limit comes off on the 1st of July this year. And this has allowed owner-occupiers, particularly first-home buyers, back into the market. Through the year, credit to owner-occupiers is growing at 8%, almost 4 times the pace of investor credit, while the number of first home buyer loans approved are up 30.7% through the year, and the share of loan approvals to first home buyers is now at 17.6%. That's up from 13.8% a year ago, and that is in line with the longer run average. In fact, it's just above it. So a welcome return of first home buyers who perhaps had thought they'd never be able to get back in. And here they are coming back in as a result of the combination of policies, which I'd acknowledge also at a state level have assisted, particularly in New South Wales and in Victoria. This is what our approach was designed and intended to do. But we chose to use the scalpel, not the chainsaw. The chainsaw would get a chainsaw effect. And it was bad enough when Labor first proposed these changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax, and the risk that they presented at that time. But to mindlessly persist with them now, when the malady they said they were designed to address, the measures that the government and the careful approach that the government has undertaken has actually addressed those issues, I think betrays something else. To do so when a soft landing is being engineered through the multitude of measures that are being pursued shows poor judgment, one, but it also betrays that it was never about housing affordability. It was just about more tax. And you always want more tax if you can't control your spending. And it's not just the direct effect on the construction industry which is a threat from this. Important as that is, at 8% of gross value added and 10% of employment coming from the construction sector. But it's about the ram rate effect it can have on the housing market, which would flow through to the wider economy through a lack of confidence and consumption by Australian households. Consumption by Australian households has been modest and moderate, and we do want to see it improve. That's what our personal tax plan is all about. Our personal tax plan isn't about winners and losers. Our plan is about all Australians who are working and paying tax winning. We're not trying to set one group of people by taxing them more against another group of people. That's not the policies of economics, that's the policies of envy. Our plan, whether it's what we're doing in the housing sector or what it's doing in personal tax, is designed to provide some underpinning confidence to consumption in our economy. So not only will it act as a wrecking ball in the housing market itself, the policy is poorly targeted, I'd say. And it hits aspirational Australians. A mystery to some in the Labor Party what that means, but it hits aspirational Australians who are merely trying to provide for their family in their retirement, particularly small business owners, many of them whom in the housing and construction sector. They don't have an employer who tips in the superannuation over the course of their working life. What they do is they go and buy an investment property. They may well have even built it themselves. They go and they buy shares in Australian companies, so during lean times, and particularly in their retirement, they'll be able to actually take the tax refunds through the imputation credits. Gone, under what our opponents are proposing. But for these aspirational Australians, who the Labor Party likes to paint and tar as some group of fat cats roaming the country, is a lie. And it's part of their class envy tactics. Because the facts don't bear it out. The 15-16 tax statistics show that there are 57,000 teachers who negatively gear their investment property, the second highest occupational category. Add to that 38,000 nurses and 38,000 Australians who work in the retail sector. I don't think they're fat cats. In fact, a higher share of police and emergency service workers negatively gear than company CEOs and senior managers. 1 in 5 police officers negatively gear. 1 in 5. Around 72% of those who negatively gear have only one investment property. You listen to the Labor Party, you think everybody who's got an investment property owns half a regional town or city. They own one. 72% of them. They got one. And a further 19% have two. Heaven forbid. They've tried to get ahead and aspire to something for their own future and provide for their own family. And around 2/3 of those who negatively gear have taxable incomes less than $80,000. Now, I know the Labor Party says, oh, well, it only applies to future ones. Sorry? So, if you're a police officer before and you were doing that, fair enough. But what about the police officer who's coming out of Goulburn today? Tough for you. The nurse who's coming out of that brand spanking new training facility out there in Liverpool. What if they want to get ahead and do that? Tough luck for you. They just don't get aspiration in this country. They really don't. I joked yesterday that aspiration wasn't a country, referring to the Deputy Leader of the Labor Party's remarks, thinking Africa was a country. But aspiration is something that drives a nation. And whether it's taxes on housing, or taxes on savings, or taxes on business, or taxes on just trying to get ahead and earn more, it kills aspiration, which is, I know, something that drives your industry so well. But as well as protecting businesses within the construction sector from a hard landing, in the housing market, we're also doing serious things with the great support of the NBA. And Danita, I want to thank you for that, and your predecessors, particularly Willem as well, for the strong stand that the master builders have had in a tough industrial and political climate. Plenty go missing in these contests, and I know who they are, and they know I know who they are. But that accusation can never be levelled at the master builders, ever, because they have been stoic on this, because you know the impact. It's not about picking a side. Master builders haven't picked a side. Master builders have been pursuing the interests of their members and the Australian economy, and for that, and the courage they've showed in doing that, despite the attacks, despite the political targeting that you endured, I want to pay tribute to your courage. The construction sector employs 1.2 million Australians, 10% of the workforce. It represents 8% of our economy. It cannot afford to be undermined by careless and reckless policy. The re-establishment of the Australian Building and Construction Commission was key to the Turnbull government's plan to grow our economy and give the sector the necessary boost and protection, as well as enhancing Australia's reputation as a good place to do business. With its re-establishment, 1.2 million workers and the 367,000 small businesses who work in the building and construction industry have a legitimate, independent body to protect them from the thuggery and the intimidation that we have come to expect from unions in the building and construction sector. Given the significant employment and the more than $700 billion in construction projects underway or in the pipeline, let's not forget the government is investing $75 billion on a rolling basis in infrastructure around the country, so we've got a lot of skin in this game too. We cannot have that spending and that cost driven up by thugs on building sites, by bikies being used to come and intimidate people on building sites. That cannot be allowed to continue. And as a government, we've taken action with the tremendous support of organisations like the NBA in particular to seek to put an end to that behaviour. The government also remains committed to getting the Ensuring Integrity Bill through the Senate to further hold union officials to account for bullying behaviour. The bill will give the courts greater ability to disqualify union officials and cancel registrations, and give the courts more power to target misdeeds in a registered organisation and take action. Now, Labor have decided to block this, which should come as no surprise to anyone in this room, I'm sure. Last week, the CFMEU, one of the Labor Party's biggest donors, what is it with Labor and cash, cracked the 15 million mark in fines, confirming its reputation as Australia's most lawless union. But you listen to the head of the ACTU, apparently the law doesn't always have to apply to unions. Another issue that is front of mind of my colleague Craig Laundy as the Minister is ensuring small business and contractors get paid on time for their work, for the work they have done, regardless of which state or territory they operate in. The government recently released the National Review of Security Payment Laws undertaken by John Murray, which identified a path forward to remove these delays that cost small businesses dearly and put jobs at risk. Subcontractors and small businesses should be paid not only for the work they do, but they should be paid on time. Our current system is letting down those businesses and crunching their cash flows, with subcontractors in their building and construction industry getting paid on average 26.4 days late. In the UK, subbies or small businesses are paid on average 5.8 days late. Not paying someone on time is actually taking a no-interest loan from them, and it's not right, and we've got to do better. The path to reform follows the implementation of the government's own rules on payments that now require governments to pay contractors within 20 days for contracts worth up to $1 million. In addition to these changes, you'll also be aware, which I don't have time to go into now, the measures I announced in the budget to combat illegal phoenixing, which I know occurs in this sector. Finally, our measures to address housing affordability are continuing to be rolled out. Our First Home Super Savers scheme is providing that opportunity for young Australian home buyers. From July 1, Australians will be able to downsize their family home to something more suitable or head into aged care and contribute some of the proceeds to their superannuation on a non-concessional basis. People aged over 65 will be able to make non-concessional contributions to their superannuation of up to $300,000, helping free up housing stock for younger families. Often in those cases, those sites are redeveloped, as I see a lot of in my own community in the Sutherland Shire. These measures, combined with a raft of initiatives to unlock land and address supply issues, including our online government land registry and our $1 billion national housing infrastructure facility that provides grants to build infrastructure that unlocks new housing, together also with the support of affordable and social housing through the National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation and the low interest loans and changes to tax treatment of those investments are also put in place, and they'll be rolling out as well as they pass through the Parliament. All of this is part of our plan for a stronger economy, because everything depends on a stronger economy. Thank you for your attention.